Well, this is going to be the fun list, guys. Whenever there is a top 15 or top 10 best movies of 2024, of course, there has to be the worst list, because this is the funnest list that you can do for your end of the year list. Even though you hate some of these movies so much, it's really fun to rant about these movies one last time. So yes, this is my top 10 worst movies of 2024. Now, here's the thing. If you like some of these movies on this list, I'm happy you do. I'm happy you love these movies. These are just movies that I personally hate in 2024. These are the movies that I just want to forget about throughout next year. I don't want to remember every single one of these shit movies that I put on this list. So, you guys know how this works. You've been on my YouTube channel since 9 years. You know how my top 10 worst movies goes. Even like through other movie critics, you know what a top 10 worst list is. So let's just get straight into it. Let's just get this over with and talk about these shitty movies one last time and just forget about it next year and worry about some worse movies that are coming out next year in 2025 and do it all over again. And of course, before we get into my top 10 worst movies of 2024, we have some honorable mentions to discuss, or what everyone calls it, dishonorable mentions. Starting with Drive Away Dolls, Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate, Terror, The Strangers Chapter 1, The Garfield Movie, The Exorcism, and Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 2. These movies are atrocious, terrible movies that I want to forget in 2024, but you guys are lucky enough you're not in the official top 10 list. So, let's just get this over with, guys. Let's talk about the movies that I personally hate in 2024. Let's get into my top 10 worst movies or shittiest movies of 2024. Starting off with my number 10, we have Night Swim. Who remembers this film? A horror movie that's produced by Blumhouse about a haunted swimming pool. Yes, I'm not joking. This is a horror movie about a haunted swimming pool. This could have been a fun B-movie at least, but unfortunately this movie takes itself way too seriously than it is, with some terrible writing, terrible acting, especially from Wyatt Russell. Oh my god, this is one of the worst performances that I've ever seen in a movie. A concept that could have been at least interesting. It's kind of original in a way. A haunted something that you're not expecting. A freaking fun swimming pool. But unfortunately the movie takes itself way too seriously. The backstory of the pool is absolutely atrocious. It's a movie that I cannot believe Blumhouse has directed. And this is not the only Blumhouse movie that's on this worst list, because Blumhouse has been terrible this year. Coming into my number 9 is Harold and the Purple Crown. One of the most generic family films that I have ever seen. A movie that could have been so much imaginative if it sticks with its source material and becomes an animated film. It would have been at least an imaginative film. Instead, we have Harold turn into Zachary Levi trying to find the narrator of this film. While he also has a purple crown. I'm not even kidding. That's literally the plot of this movie. This movie is cliche as hell, goes in ways you freaking expected throughout the beginning of this film. The acting in this film is so bland, especially Zachary Levi. I love Zachary Levi, but he's just so bland in this movie, looking like he's just in this movie for a paycheck. Zoe Deschanel doesn't want to be in this movie at all. You can really tell. None of the actors fall in it. This movie's not funny. This movie's not imaginative. It's just a forgettable family film that I've seen this year, and it's a movie that I want kids to completely forget about. Coming into my number 8 is The Crow, a remake that we don't really need. The Brandon Lee version is fantastic. Now, I do think Bill Skarsgård is great casting for The Crow, but the biggest problem with this remake is that it's really badly written. The whole movie itself becomes this really boring revenge film. It's basically the original film, but just stepped down to a minimum in low. Especially that we don't get to see The Crow turn into The Crow until like the ending of this movie. I am not kidding. The action scenes are generic, except for that opera house scene. I would say that action scene was badass. I actually did like this scene. That's why it's a bit low on my list. But it isn't enough to say to me because the acting is atrocious. Bill Skarsgård is literally trying to get through this terrible script, but he's just not that great in this movie. I feel like doing another adaptation of Crow could have been at least okay, but unfortunately this movie just has the wrong writers and directors here. Definitely the remake of The Crow. Just stay in a coffin. Just stay in a coffin and stay dead. Coming to my number 7 is Rebel Moon Part 2 The Scar Giver. With the first movie just being very meh, with an awesome potential that this could have been a really interesting space opera film. And Zack Snyder, I always like this director, but I think Rebel Moon is one of the biggest mistakes he's ever done, especially with Rebel Moon Part 2, The Scargiver. This made me not even want to watch the director's cut, because I just do not give a shit about it, because unfortunately, with Rebel Moon Part 2, The Scargiver, it is one of the most boring battle films that I have ever seen. There's not much development, it's just things happening. There's no lead up, there's no build up, it's just things happening. The build up to the fight is boring as shit, the fight scenes are boring as shit with typical Zack Snyder slow motion scenes that we have seen. It's just wasted potential. This could have been a really awesome follow-up to the first movie, because I thought the first movie was just, man, okay, and I thought, you know what, maybe part 2 will be better. No, somehow part 2 is just worse than part 1. So yeah, Rebel Moon is just a big mistake from Zack Snyder. Just don't get involved with these movies, because honestly, they do not work, and it made me refuse to watch the director's cut because I just do not give a shit about these movies. Coming into my number 6 is Imaginary, another Blumhouse horror film about an object turns evil. Man, Imaginary is just a complete cash grab for me. It's a movie that we've seen many times before. Now, a horror movie about imaginary friends could have been a really interesting idea. Probably a better idea than a haunted swimming pool, but unfortunately, this at least made Night Swim more of a guilty pleasure, because this movie bored me to shreds. This movie is not scary. Chauncey the Bear is one of the most forgettable horror icons that I have ever seen. The little girl in the movie, I thought she's very annoying in this film. The whole world of horror in the imaginary world, it's just really not that great developed. And the scares in the movie, of course, are some of the scares that you've seen in many horror films before, so I did not jump once throughout the film. I was just wanting to leave. I checked my watch the entire time. That's how forgettable Imaginary is. Okay, now we're in the top 5. These are the worst movies of 2024 that I just want to absolutely forget. These are the movies that made me want to forget these movies that came out in 2024, but unfortunately I'm making this worst list, so I have to remember them somehow. Coming to my number 5 is Megalopolis, a movie that I cannot believe it is directed by one of the most legendary directors out there, Francis Ford Coppola. The guy who directed the Godfather trilogy, the guy who directed Apocalypse Now, the guy who directed The Outsiders directed this shit. How? Literally, from The Godfather to this, how? The acting in this movie. Big actors in this film, and they're basically acting like Tommy Wiseau if he just has his soul inside these actors. Adam Driver's bad in this movie. Natalie Emmanuel is bad in this movie. Shia LaBeouf and Aubrey Plaza feel like they're in the wrong movie here. Like, what the heck type of movie they are in? And wasted actors like Dustin Hoffman and Lawrence Fishburne. Just wasted potential in general. I even forgot what the story is in this movie. There's nothing that I was interested throughout the movie. The visual effects and the green screen even looks horrible in this film. This is trying to be one of those imaginative films, and literally this is just a mindfuck of disaster. It's a movie that I cannot believe Francis Ford Coppola has directed. It's a movie that I cannot believe it's even made in the first place. Definitely one of the biggest bombs of the year. I absolutely agree with that. This movie deserves to bomb because of how terribly written and developed this movie is. Francis Ford Coppola, come on, you can do better than this. Coming to my number 4 is Kraven the Hunter, a movie that made me glad that the Sony Marvel Spider-Man villain universe that doesn't have Spider-Man in it is over. Because I want it to be over. You can tell that they made these movies just for money. They don't make this movie to make fans like the movie or care about what fans wanted. It's just made for money. That's literally why these movies are made, because there's no purpose for these movies to even be made. Kraven the Hunter could have been a really cool movie, but unfortunately we had some really terrible writing, terrible ADR. Aaron Taylor Johnson is the best part of the movie, but he isn't great in the film. The rest of the casting, like Ariana DeBose, Russell Crowe, what happened? They were literally in this film for a paycheck. You can really freaking tell. The ADR in this movie is very, very noticeable in the film. The action scenes are at least fine, but just very forgettable as hell. The CGI is terrible, especially with the Rhino. Oh my god. The actor who played the Rhino in this movie is one of the worst villains I've ever seen, and the CGI on the Rhino is some of the worst CGI that I have seen this year. If this is the final film in the series, just skip it. Like, literally skip it. There is no purpose why this universe is made, even though I like the first 2 Venom films. I like them for what they are. Somehow movies like Morbius, Madam Web, and this movie, it's just like, yeah, we're just gonna make these movies for money. That is it. Spoiler alert, Madam Web's on this list, and you probably guess where it is, but we'll get to that movie later. Coming to my number 3 is Afraid. Who knows this movie or remembers this movie? Probably if you watch this worst list, you'd be like, what the heck is this movie? Yes, this is another Blumhouse horror film that is probably one of the worst Blumhouse horror films that I have ever seen. This time, it's a haunted movie about a haunting Alexa. You see where we're going here? We have a lot of haunted objects that came out this year, and the Haunted Alexa movie is definitely the worst out of 3 movies in this worst list because, man, this is one of the most forgettable horror movies that I have ever seen. I barely remember what happens in this film. I remember the ending though. I remember how fucking confusing this ending is. But other than that, the characters are forgettable, the 2 main leads are filling it in, the kids are annoying as fuck in this movie, and the Haunted Alexa, I even forgot what the Haunted Alexa's name is. It just shows how much I don't care about this movie. Everything about this movie is just forgettable. Right when I walked out of the film, I completely forgot about the film. I watched this movie with my friend, and we were unbelievers of how terrible Afraid is. Yeah, if a movie is just completely forgettable and you forgot what happens in the film, it deserves to be on my worst list. Now 2 and 1, like my best list. This is a hard list to do because 2 and 1 could have been my number 1 both together because I hate these movies so much. But like I said before, which one outweighs the other? But it doesn't change because these 2 movies are like both my number 1. Coming to my number 2 is Borderlands. Oh my god. This movie happened. Eli Roth, what happened, man? You just made Thanksgiving. That movie was awesome. And now you made this pile of shit. With the actors that look like they're in this movie for a paycheck. Cate Blanchett, you can really tell she doesn't want to be in this movie. You can really tell that. This movie disrespects the fans of Borderlands. Even the fans of Borderlands games hate this movie. If the fans of the source material hate this adaptation, you're definitely doing something wrong here. The action scenes aren't interesting, the characters are completely forgettable. This is literally a rip-off of Guardians of the Galaxy, but it's like made into like a $30 budget. It felt like that because the visual effects in this movie are absolutely atrocious. It's definitely a film I wanted to walk out of. Seriously, this is a film that I was on the edge of my seat going, this movie happened. This movie was made. I haven't played the Borderlands games, and even I noticed how bad this movie is because the story is generic, the characters are forgettable, this movie's not funny, the action scenes aren't interesting, everything about this movie is just forgettable, but it's not as worse as my number 1. So, let's just get into it. My number 1, this is the movie that is the biggest disaster of 2024. This is a movie that I will remember 2024 for, but not in a good way. Even though there are a lot of great movies that came out this year, there is one worst movie that I'm going to be like, I cannot believe this movie's made in 2024. You've guessed what it is. I mentioned it in this video. You're probably thinking, where is this movie on this list? It's on there. It's just on my number 1. My number 1 is Madam Web. Sony, Marvel, I just got one thing to say to you. What the fuck are you doing with Madam Web? What's the intention with this movie? What is the tension? I cannot believe a movie like this is even made. If I had the worst comic book movie on this list that is worse than movies like Batman and Robin, Superman 4 Quest for Peace, and even Fan 4 Stick. Yes, Madam Web just outshines those movies by being the worst comic book movie that I have seen in a long time. Nothing about this movie is great. The action, forgettable. The characters, forgettable. The casting look like they're definitely in for a paycheck. Dakota Johnson is one of the most unlikable characters that I have ever seen in a film. There's not a single sense in this film where I'm like, Madam Web's likable. Nah, Madam Web's just a complete bitch in this film. The 3 Spider-Women, they're just shooting into this movie. Literally. They wore those suits throughout like 5 seconds of the film. That's it. Like, what is this movie trying to be? What's the purpose of Madam Web? Is it trying to be something new? Is it trying to be something different? Is it trying to be Terminator in the Marvel Universe? Because any of these things don't work. And the villain of this film, the evil Spider-Man character. Actually, you know what? I'm not even going to call him evil Spider-Man. I call him ADR Man, because that's literally his character. His character is completely ADR. None of his dialogue matches the lips that he is speaking. One of the worst Marvel films, one of the worst comic book movies, one of the worst movies that I've ever seen in a long time. Seriously, you guys know how shit Madam Web is. Some maybe said it's like The Room with comic book movies. I didn't feel that at all. I just want to forget about this movie, not watch this movie again. Literally wanted to throw every single copy of Madam Web in stores to make people not buy the movie. It's still bloody like $30 on 4K at my store. God! So guys, those are my top 10 worst movies of 2024. Even though I hate these movies so much, it's definitely a fun list. I love talking about these worst movies one last time, made me forget about for next year. So let me know in the comments below what movies you despise in 2024. Top 10, 15, however you want it. Let me know in the comments below what your top 10 worst movies of 2024. Look forward to my next two end of year list, which is surprising and disappointing. I don't know which order I want to do it in, so you'll expect one out of the other. But those videos are coming soon. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you guys follow me on social media links down below. Keep contact with me, and have a nice day.